everybody. I'm recording some sessions here for you today, which inevitably means that I got a lot of noise going on outside, but we'll do the best we can. Thank you for joining me. I'm Hallie Hara, and today's topic is near and dear to my heart. It's get comfortable with being uncomfortable, building confidence in the professional workplace. This is something that I have struggled with for years. And so I enjoy researching this topic for you because, we all struggle with those uncomfortable lives or moments in our lives. And I think I tend to feel like I have more than most. Okay, so what I've done here for you is just sort of curate what I think is some really good content on this topic. But I also want to start with, what is prompting me to actually put together a presentation on getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I will tell you, as someone who's done externship work for a long time, and I've spent many, many hours reading student journals and reflection. And one thing is very consistent, and that is everybody is filled with doubts. I often, when I'm reading these back to back, I often want to, and I don't, but I'm often tempted to share similar comments with students because it feels like you're alone in your discomfort. But almost every single student is going to have it as they work at an externship site. So getting comfortable with the idea that you are going to have lots of firsts, right? You're going to have things that are going to make you doubt yourself. And you are not alone in that. And how do I get past that? So if you're feeling alone, I have this slide for you, which is really a journey through the extern mind, right? Based on the journals that I'm reading, and I see things like this. Maybe I'm not good enough to do this work. I have no idea how I got this externship, right? It's a bit of imposter syndrome, right? They're going to discover that I actually shouldn't have gotten this job, right? I can't ask that question. I'll look stupid. I'll keep researching just in case. I don't want them to know that I have weak research skills, right? Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And finally, the catch-all, I have no idea what I'm doing. So if you haven't had any of these thoughts, in the externship environment or in law school in general, God bless you, but you are a bit of a unicorn because I really find that students, like all people, have these thoughts, and whether it's conscious or unconscious, they pop up. So how do we combat them? And my response, as just a total layperson, is try and answer these thoughts, right? I'm uncomfortable, but I'm doing it anyway. The thing, I'm just going to be honest, the thing I always think about in this context, I don't love to fly. Post 9/11, I never really thought about it before then. Post 9/11, I fly more and more infrequently. I have children, so for all of us to fly somewhere is costly. And so when I do get on a plane, I'm a little more nervous than I once was when I was young and carefree. But I never want to be the kind of person who lets that fear or doubt decide what I'm going to do in my life, right? So I say, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm doing it anyway, right? With discomfort comes growth, right? In your externship and taking the plane, right? I'm going to grow and learn depending on where I go. And if you stay inside your comfort zone, you'll be comfortable, but you're never going to grow. You're just going to stagnate. So these are sort of the fundamental things that I tend to think of. But beyond what I think, because I'm just a layperson, I want to tell you kind of what the experts in the field are saying. And for those of you who don't know Brene Brown, I am a big fan. She has lots of best-selling books. Her TED Talk is one of the most famous TED Talks there is. So if you have a few minutes to look into her, this may be a good resource for you. But in the event that you don't, I pulled some of her work to share it with you today to maybe help you through these moments of discomfort during your externship. So she talks about, her famous TED Talk is about vulnerability in the workplace, right? Which she defines as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And one of her areas of study has been about shame, right? So she's a social scientist. She's done a lot of research to back up her findings. And one of the things she says with unequivocally is that we all struggle with shame and the fear of not being enough, right? So when you think about it that way, and based on her data, it really normalizes those feelings that you have. And she says, courage sounds great, right? Just be brave, just face it. But we need to talk about how it requires us to let go of what other people think, which is scary, right? And maybe not something you want to do at your externship. I don't want to look foolish. I'm looking for a job, things like that. And I love this first bullet point because I think it's just, there's so much in there. You can be brave and afraid at the same time. And I think back to my first deposition. I was scared to death. And Michelle Fisher, if you ever come across this video, she was the person who was sitting next to me, my supervisor, really pushing me and saying, you can do this. And I did do it. So I was brave and afraid at the same time. You can make a conscious choice to believe in yourself, she says, because, which leads to the third bullet point, you are worthy, period. You're not worthy when you do your first trial, when you take your first deposition, when you prove that you are a good writer. You are worthy, right? You are worthy of this externship opportunity. You are worthy of people's time, the time they take out to teach you, to mentor you. And we're all capable of developing resilience, right? So these are points that Brene Brown makes. I also have a podcast. One of the episodes is specifically about resilience, and it's about a book on that topic. So if that's something you're interested in, there's another avenue for you to pursue. But what Brene Brown encourages you to do is embrace imperfection as necessary. It's necessary for creativity, innovation, and change, right? None of us are perfect. We're all human. And perfectionism, I'd like to speak about because law students, I find generally, are type A, myself included. And perfectionism, on the one hand, could seem like a good thing, that you're striving to do your best, that you're trying to be perfect, to get it just right. But what Brene Brown teaches is that it's actually not the same thing. There's healthy achievement and growth, which is based on self-improvement, versus the idea that if we appear perfect, right? If we don't make ourselves vulnerable, if we look like we got it all figured out, then there's no judgment or shame associated with that. And those are two very different concepts. And by focusing on perfection, her thought is that you hamper your own success, right? It's self-destructive because basically you're hiding, right? Instead of taking calculated risks, you're hiding because there is no such thing as perfection. So, she encourages you to compare the idea of how can I improve, which is healthy, versus what will they think of me, right? These are two different things. And so you have to develop in the legal profession as a professional, as an extern, as a new attorney, you have to develop resilience, self-compassion, and lean into the discomfort. And, I've put up all sorts of embarrassing pictures of myself and shared some pretty embarrassing stories, what has happened to me in my career. And you just got to kind of learn to laugh at yourself. In the moment, it doesn't always feel great. But really, in the big picture, how much is whatever you're hung up on going to matter in, 6 years from now, 10 years from now? Odds are probably not that much. And her research as a social scientist shows that vulnerability is at the heart of the feedback process, right? And I tend to think about this in terms other than externship. I tend to think about this. I like to go to art shows. right? My husband's an artist. My father-in-law is an artist. I dabbled in art once upon a time, and I like to go to art shows. And if you've ever gone to art shows, you go around from tent to tent, and a lot of times the person sitting there selling their art is the artist themselves. So it's neat. You could talk to them about it. But, art is pretty subjective. And there are lots of people who come up and say really rude things. And they're probably not conscious of the fact that, the artist is sitting right there. But that's feedback, right? By putting themselves out there, by putting their art out there for consumption, that person is vulnerable to things that they might not like to hear. And that's very true in an externship as well, right? Getting feedback on your work is a great way to grow. But you're probably going to feel very vulnerable, which just know that that's completely normal. She says we can't opt out of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure that's woven through our daily experiences. And really, if you're tuned into this, even just for a day, you will find that this happens all day long, right? I just got off a committee meeting and we were all sharing our points of view on something. We all reviewed material independently and we were all sharing our points of view. There's a little emotional exposure in sharing my point of view if it differs from somebody else's. But this point, I think, drives it home why it's worth it to stay true to who you are. So our worth and our belonging are not negotiated with other people. We carry those inside our hearts. So what that means to me is you have to figure out, and I will help you through this process, because one of the things I'm very interested in is professional identity development or professional identity formation, however you want to say it. You have to figure out who you are as a professional and realize that's not negotiable, right? And so if, for example, feedback you get from a supervisor wants you to really push a piece of authority to almost be what you would consider misrepresenting it to the core, right? If your personal values say, I am not willing to go that far, I'm an officer of the court, right? It's non-negotiable. That doesn't matter what the feedback is, what the external discomfort is. You know who you are. So that's something we hope to really work with you on during the course of your externship, because really, if you can form that identity even before you have your law license, you are so far ahead of so many practitioners out there. So there's another good source I found that talked about this topic. And that's a podcast by organizational psychologist Adam Grant. And that's a typo. Good God, I'm going to have to fix that. Your insecurities, not your insecurities, I'm not perfect either, aren't exactly what you think they are. So it's a work-life podcast with Adam Grant. And some of what he talked about on there, if you have time to listen to it, I would highly recommend it. If you just Google this, you'll find it. But he talks about the difference between self-esteem and security. So self-esteem, he explains, is how much confidence you have, right? Different from being secure or insecure, which is how stable your confidence is, right? So you might have a great self-esteem, but also be very insecure. So your confidence, that confidence that you have in yourself, is very unstable. So, he gives the example of bullying, right? He says bullies tend to have, contrary to public opinion, high self-esteem. They really tend to believe in themselves, but it's very insecure, that confidence, so that when it's threatened, they immediately feel the need to strike back, right? So what you want to work on is having, self-esteem, feeling good about yourself, but working on that stability is key. I think that's something we all need to work on because the statistics show, and according to Adam Grant, nearly 70% of people have experienced imposter syndrome. Think about that. 70% of the population is walking around saying, I don't know if I believe, I believe that I belong here, right? I don't know if I have what it takes to do whatever it is that I'm doing. And so these are quotes from the podcast that I thought were great. So Adam Grant says, at work, if you're insecure, making one mistake can bring your entire sense of confidence and worth crashing down. Being secure means your confidence isn't easily shattered. You can fail without feeling like a complete failure, which is important because failure is a stepping stone to success in so many jobs. So, that's what we learn from. We learn from failure, right? And so when you think about it like that, it's absolutely a necessity. So this is where you have to be careful not to catastrophize, right? You make one mistake or you get a piece of negative feedback at work. I made one mistake, typographical error, and the title of this slide is driving me crazy, but it doesn't mean I'm a total failure. No, it doesn't. It means that I should probably correct it in case I'm going to give this presentation again. So we all make mistakes. So being secure means you can fail without your confidence being shattered. There's a website called Leadership First, and I also found some content there that I thought might be helpful to you. It's a quote that I particularly liked is, you can't be committed to your dreams and your comfort zone at the same time. So if you are taking an externship thinking that you really want to grow as a professional, you really can't stay in your comfort zone. So, this causes me to ask, so think about part of everything that I preach related to externships is being very deliberate about your experience. So what situations make you feel uncomfortable? Is it feedback, or is it when you're asked to share your opinion in a meeting? Think about specifically what situations sort of are triggers for you, and also observe what you're feeling, right? How do you, I know exactly what that discomfort feels like for me. I feel, kind of shaky. My heart races a little bit. I definitely feel like that sort of pit in my stomach. So physically notice those times where you're experiencing discomfort. And mentally, what goes through your mind when you're uncomfortable? And I think some of those thoughts, right, that pop into our heads that, are consistent with imposter syndrome are things that probably fill that criteria. And then come up with strategies. What can you do when you feel anxious, right? Maybe develop something you're going to say over and over again, right? I have a friend who flies who says, it's scary and uncomfortable, but not deadly. She doesn't like to fly either. Maybe come up with a phrase that you could tell yourself. One mistake doesn't make me a failure. One failure doesn't mean I won't be successful in my career. Whatever that is for you, you need to have, something that tells yourself, it's sort of a reminder to take you out of those moments of discomfort to say, yes, you can, because I really believe in you. And don't forget that externships are a learning experience. People do not bring you on it as externs relying on your substantive knowledge, right? You can't know everything. Part of being a lawyer is just having the skills to look things up, to figure things out, to solve these puzzles as they present themselves, not to be an expert on everything. So don't be so hard on yourself. Give yourself grace, embrace the discomfort, knowing that you will grow through this experience. So as always, just do your best and know I'll be rooting for you. Thanks.